Question 71. An SP technician is physically organizing newly disinfected intravenous infusion pumps on the designated wire racks inside the clean equipment storage area. How must these specific medical devices be physically maintained so they can be immediately deployed when an intensive care unit requests them? A. In a fully functional state prepared for immediate patient deployment. B. In a disassembled state awaiting secondary mechanical washing. C. In a quarantined state pending final biomedical engineering approval. D. In a terminally sterilized state sealed within a rigid aluminum container. Correct answer A. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale: after patient care equipment is thoroughly cleaned, chemically disinfected, and function tested in the sterile processing department, it must be stored in a ready-to-dispense condition. This ensures that when a nursing floor urgently calls for a device, the technician can immediately physically transfer it without causing any critical patient care delays. Trap analysis. Option B. Disassembled devices are not ready for use. This option would be correct if the technician was placing the pump components onto a holding rack inside the soiled decontamination room. Option C. Equipment in storage has already been cleared. This option would be correct if the facility had just received a shipment of brand new, never-before-used telemetry monitors that biomedical engineering had not yet inspected. Option D. Standard patient care equipment only requires surface disinfection, not terminal sterilization. This option would be correct if the technician was storing a critical surgical instrument set bound for the operating room. Concept extension. To visually indicate to the nursing staff that the pump is clean and ready for immediate deployment, the technician should physically apply a protective plastic cover or a designated clean tag over the equipment's power cord. Question 72. While manually scrubbing the bioburden-filled box lock of a heavy surgical clamp at the 3-compartment sink, the SP technician must select an appropriate cleaning tool. Which specific bristle material is strictly mandated for this physical task to effectively remove soil without damaging the instrument's protective surface? A. Synthetic nylon fibers. B. Porous wooden filaments. C. Abrasive metallic wires. D. Absorbent organic cotton threads. Correct answer A. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. Nylon is the universally approved material for manual cleaning brushes in the decontamination area. It is physically rigid enough to create the necessary friction to dislodge heavy organic soils, yet soft enough not to scratch the protective chromium oxide layer of stainless steel instruments, and its non-porous nature prevents it from absorbing contaminated fluids. Trap analysis. Option B. Wood is highly porous and will absorb bacteria, turning the brush itself into a dangerous fomite. This option would be correct if describing a prohibited material that must be instantly discarded if found in the sink area. Option C. Metal bristles will aggressively scratch the instrument, leading to permanent pitting and rust. This option would be correct if the technician was utilizing a specialized tool specifically designed to physically shave down excess material on a manufacturer's workbench, not for routine cleaning. Option D. Cotton absorbs bioburden and lacks the physical stiffness required to scrub away dried blood. This option would be correct if the technician was using a disposable towel to gently dry the exterior of a delicate camera lens. Concept extension. Even when constructed of proper nylon, decontamination brushes must be routinely inspected for physical wear, bent bristles, and trapped debris, and they must undergo a complete daily disinfection cycle to remain safe for use. Question 73. A sterile processing preceptor is teaching a trainee about the invisible hazards routinely encountered at the decontamination sorting tables. The preceptor explains that their entire physical sterilization workflow is fundamentally engineered to combat entities studied in the field of microbiology. What exact physical targets does this specific scientific field actively analyze? A. Microscopic living organisms. B. The human anatomical immune system. C. The chemical composition of enzymatic detergents. D. The thermodynamic properties of pressurized steam. Correct answer A. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. By breaking down the medical terminology, micro translates to very small, bio translates to life, and logi translates to the study of. Therefore, microbiology is the scientific study of microscopic living organisms, such as bacteria, viruses, and fungi, which the sterile processing department aims to physically destroy to ensure patient safety. Trap analysis. Option B. The study of the body's physical defense mechanisms against disease is immunology. This option would be correct if the trainee was taking a nursing course on how white blood cells actively attack invading pathogens. Option C. The study of chemicals and their specific interactions is chemistry. This option would be correct if the preceptor was explaining the molecular breakdown of lipid molecules when exposed to a specific lipase additive. Option D. The study of heat, pressure, and energy transfer is physics. This option would be correct if the preceptor was explaining how ambient air is physically displaced by gravity inside an active autoclave chamber. Concept extension. Understanding the basic physical characteristics of these organisms, such as knowing that certain bacteria can form highly resistant protective spores, dictates exactly why strict high-temperature sterilization parameters are absolutely required. Question 74. Before physically crossing the threshold from the public locker room into the clean prep and pack zone, an SP technician meticulously dons a facility-laundered scrub suit and a secure bouffant head cover. This specific physical behavior directly demonstrates the technician's fundamental grasp of aseptic technique, which is defined as executing what exact operational goal? A. Performing proactive physical activities that block the transmission of infectious agents. B. Conducting retroactive statistical audits on facility-wide surgical site infection rates. C. Mandating the legal compliance guidelines for federal bloodborne pathogen exposure. D. Designing the mechanical layout of the departmental continuous quality improvement framework. Correct answer A. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. Aseptic technique encompasses the active, physical practices and behaviors executed by healthcare personnel to maintain clean areas and prevent the spread of pathogenic microorganisms. By physically changing into clean attire and covering their hair, the technician actively prevents outside contaminants from falling onto the surgical instruments they are about to package. Trap analysis. Option B. Statistical auditing is an infection control administrative task, not a physical preventative technique. This option would be correct if the scenario described an epidemiologist reviewing patient charts in a hospital office. Option C. Federal legal guidelines are written by government agencies like OSHA, not the physical action of donning PPE. This option would be correct if the scenario asked what specific administrative text requires facilities to provide safety needles to clinical staff. Option D. Designing a quality improvement framework is a management function. This option would be correct if the department director was drafting a new policy detailing how often automated washers must be chemically tested for efficacy. Concept extension. Aseptic technique relies heavily on situational awareness, summarized by the rule: know what is dirty, know what is clean, know what is sterile, and keep them physically separated at all times. Question 75. While consulting a printed preference card for a complex burn reconstruction procedure, the SP technician physically pulls a heavy dermatome from the sterile storage rack. By mentally breaking down the specific suffix of this medical term, the technician knows this powered device serves what precise mechanical function in the operating room? A. To physically incise or slice through human tissue. B. To structurally reconstruct a damaged cellular membrane. C. To securely anchor a transplanted anatomical organ in place. D. To tightly suture a deep epidermal laceration. Correct answer A. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. Medical suffixes denote the specific action a surgical instrument performs. The suffix tome translates strictly to a cutting instrument. Therefore, a dermatome, derma meaning skin, is a mechanical device specifically engineered to slice thin, uniform layers of skin from a donor site to be used for physical grafting. Trap analysis. Option B, reconstruction utilizes the suffix plasty. This option would be correct if the technician was prepping a tray for a rhinoplasty, indicating the surgical repair or reshaping of the nose. Option C, surgical fixation or anchoring utilizes the suffix pexy. This option would be correct if the preference card requested instruments for an orchiopexy procedure. Option D, suturing or sewing utilizes the suffix raphifi. This option would be correct if the technician was dispatching a tray specifically tailored for a herniorrhaphy. Concept extension. Because a dermatome relies on an extremely sharp, physically oscillating blade to function, the sterile processing technician must handle the device with extreme caution to prevent personal injury and ensure the blade mechanism is never dulled during manual sync processing. Question 76. While sorting a mixed bin of surgical clamps at the clean assembly station, an SP technician identifies instruments belonging to the cardiovascular department by examining the colored rings on their handles. The technician recognizes this durable, baked-on colored layer is physically created by spraying a polymer resin onto the metal. Which exact manufacturing term describes this specific instrument identification process? A. An electrochemical passivation treatment. B. A baked powder coating application. C. A deep tissue laser etching. D. A colored polyvinyl chloride tape wrapping. Correct answer B. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. Powder coating is an instrument identification method where a polymer resin powder is sprayed directly onto the surgical instrument and then heated. This heating process fuses the powder into a highly durable, solid colored layer that withstands repeated exposure to harsh sterilization cycles. Trap analysis. Option A, passivation is the invisible chemical process used to build a protective chromium oxide layer against rust, not a visible coloring method. This option would be correct if the technician was explaining why a stainless steel clamp resists corrosion in a steam autoclave. Option C, laser etching physically removes metal to engrave a permanent mark but does not add colored polymer material to the handle. This option would be correct if the technician was reading a permanent facility barcode physically carved into the metal shaft. Option D, tape wrapping involves applying physical adhesive strips, which can harbor bacteria if they peel, rather than spraying and baking a liquid resin. This option would be correct if the technician was inspecting an instrument and noticed a colored band peeling at the edges and trapping bioburden. Concept extension. While powder coating is extremely durable, technicians must still physically inspect these colored handles during assembly. If the coating chips or cracks, it creates a microscopic crevice where pathogens can hide, necessitating the instrument's immediate removal from service. Question 77. While operating a low-temperature gas plasma sterilizer, an SP technician hears a loud alarm and observes an abort error code flashing on the screen during the initial deep vacuum phase. Knowing the strict physical parameters of this specific machine, the technician immediately suspects they failed to properly execute which critical preparation step before loading the camera? A. Eradicating all residual fluid droplets from the instrument surfaces. B. Scrubbing away all hardened organic tissue from the box locks. C. Securing the items inside heavy-duty polypropylene synthetic wrappers. D. Placing the instruments inside spun-bonded high-density polyethylene pouches. Correct answer A. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. Vaporized hydrogen peroxide gas plasma sterilizers operate in a deep vacuum environment. If an instrument is loaded with residual water droplets, that moisture turns to vapor during the vacuum phase, causing the machine's internal sensors to detect a pressure anomaly and automatically abort the cycle to prevent a catastrophic failure. Trap analysis. Option B, dried organic tissue causes a critical sterilization failure by blocking the sterilant, but it does not vaporize to trigger a vacuum abort alarm. This option would be correct if the technician was investigating why a biological indicator came back positive after a physically completed cycle. Option C, polypropylene wrappers are totally compatible with gas plasma and do not cause moisture-related aborts. This option would be correct if the technician was selecting the proper synthetic flat wrap for a heavy loaner tray entering the hydrogen peroxide machine. Option D. High-density polyethylene pouches are the exact validated material for this machine and will not trigger an abort. This option would be correct if the technician was answering a question about the only acceptable peel pouch material for low-temperature gas plasma sterilization. Concept extension. Technicians utilize instrument air hoses at the prep and pack station to physically blast pressurized medical-grade air through the tiny lumens of complex endoscopes to ensure absolute dryness before packaging them for gas plasma cycles. Question 78. While assessing the sterile storage room's capacity to protect newly processed orthopedic sets from environmental dust, the supervisor instructs the SP technician to place the most delicate trays exclusively on the semi-closed shelving units. The technician physically identifies these specific racks by confirming they possess which exact structural design? A. An open wire framework featuring 0 solid boundary panels. B. A physical configuration utilizing exactly 3 solid enclosing walls. C. A fully encapsulated structure featuring 4 solid walls and a swinging door. D. A structural frame featuring precisely 2 solid side panels. Correct answer B. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. Semi-closed shelving is a specific physical design utilized in sterile storage to offer more dust protection than open wire racks while maintaining easy access. It is definitively characterized by having exactly 3 solid sides, typically consisting of a solid back panel and 2 solid side panels, with an open front facing the aisle. Trap analysis. Option A. 0 solid panels describes standard open wire shelving. This option would be correct if the technician was identifying the most common, highly ventilated racks utilized for storing massive quantities of rigid sterilization containers. Option C. A structure with 4 solid walls and a door defines a fully closed shelving unit. This option would be correct if the scenario asked what physical cabinet provides the absolute maximum protection against environmental dust contamination in a high-traffic hallway. Option D. 2 solid side panels without a back do not meet the definition of semi-closed shelving. This option would be correct if describing a custom, unstandardized cart built improperly by a local contractor. Concept extension. Regardless of whether the shelving is open, semi-closed, or fully closed, the lowest shelf must always maintain a strict physical clearance of at least 8 to 10 inches off the facility floor to prevent contamination from cleaning chemicals and mop splashes. Question 79. An SP technician is decoding a surgical pick list that requests a specific osteotome for an upcoming orthopedic reconstruction procedure. By analyzing the medical suffix of this specific term, the technician physically locates a heavy metallic instrument engineered to execute which precise mechanical action? A. To physically sever or slice through anatomical tissue. B. To structurally reconstruct a deformed cellular barrier. C. To securely anchor a transplanted organ into a bodily cavity. D. To tightly stitch together a deep dermal laceration. Correct answer A. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. In medical terminology, the suffix dictates the action of the instrument. The suffix tome specifically translates to a cutting instrument. Therefore, an osteotome, where osteo means bone, is a heavy, chisel-like mechanical device specifically designed to physically cut, shave, or sever bone tissue during orthopedic surgery. Trap analysis. Option B. Reconstruction implies the medical suffix plasty. This option would be correct if the technician was providing specific cosmetic instruments for a rhinoplasty procedure. Option C. Anchoring or fixation implies the medical suffix pexy. This option would be correct if the technician was evaluating a urology preference card requesting tools for an orchiopexy. Option D. Suturing or sewing implies the medical suffix raphifi. This option would be correct if the technician was dispatching a tray specifically tailored and loaded with needle holders for a herniorrhaphy. Concept extension. Because the entire function of an osteotome relies on its sharp beveled edge, The technician must apply specific protective tip guards over the distal end during packaging to prevent the heavy metal from piercing the sterilization wrapper. Question 80. An SP technician is helping load a commercial delivery truck destined for an off-site surgical clinic located 10 miles away. The technician must physically ensure the loading protocol strictly adheres to the fundamental infection control policy regarding the placement of freshly sterilized rigid containers alongside returning contaminated bins. Which strict physical requirement must the technician enforce? A. Ensuring the vehicle possesses adequate climate control mechanisms for severe weather. B. Maintaining a solid physical separation barrier between the sterile and biohazardous items. C. Verifying the specific fluorescent orange hue of the affixed warning labels. D. Applying an enzymatic foam specifically engineered to dissolve hardened biofilms. Correct answer B. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. Transporting medical inventory off-site presents massive cross-contamination risks. Infection control policies strictly mandate the absolute separation of clean and dirty items. If clean and soiled items must travel in the same transport vehicle, the technician must ensure there is a solid, impenetrable physical barrier completely separating the biohazardous cargo from the sterile supplies. Trap analysis. Option A. While climate control is important for vehicle logistics, it is not the primary infection control policy regarding the mixed placement of trays. This option would be correct if the scenario asked how the facility prevents high humidity from compromising sterile packaging integrity during a cross-country transport. Option C. Biohazard label coloring is regulated by OSHA, but the color alone does not prevent airborne cross-contamination inside a truck cab. This option would be correct if the technician was auditing the standardized printing requirements for a newly purchased roll of decontamination warning stickers. Option D. Applying enzymatic foam is a point-of-use cleaning treatment, not a vehicle loading separation protocol. This option would be correct if the technician was explaining what specific chemical action the scrub nurse must perform on the instruments before closing the soiled bin. Concept extension. To further reduce transport risk, the dirty items must be sealed in heavy-duty, leak-proof bins secured tightly to the vehicle walls to prevent them from tipping over and violently breaching the physical separation barrier during transit. Question 81. An SP technician is physically pushing a closed transport cart full of bloody post-operative orthopedic instruments from the surgical suite back to the processing department. To strictly maintain the facility's one-way workflow and prevent cross-contamination, the technician must physically dock and unload this specific soiled cart in which dedicated environmental zone? A. The negatively pressured decontamination area. B. The positively pressured clean preparation zone. C. The temperature-controlled sterile storage room. D. The unrestricted clean equipment dispatch window. Correct answer A. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. To contain infectious microorganisms, all soiled items must physically enter the sterile processing department exclusively through the decontamination area. This specific zone is engineered with negative air pressure to actively pull air inward, ensuring that microscopic bioburden and aerosols generated during the physical unloading and manual scrubbing processes do not escape into the clean areas of the facility. Trap analysis. Option B. The clean preparation zone is exclusively for inspecting and packaging instruments that have already been washed. This option would be correct if the technician was physically pushing a cart loaded with clean disinfected retractors fresh out of the mechanical washer. Option C. The sterile storage room houses terminally processed goods ready for patient use. This option would be correct if the technician was physically transferring a completely sterilized wrapped cardiovascular tray directly from the cooling rack to a storage shelf. Option D. Equipment dispatch handles clean patient care machines like infusion pumps. This option would be correct if a nurse arrived at the dispatch window requesting a physically clean sequential compression device for a newly admitted patient. Concept extension. The physical barriers separating the decontamination area from the clean side must include pass-through windows or dedicated automated washer disinfectors that prevent personnel from manually carrying soiled items backward against the established one-way workflow. Question 82. While standing at the 3-compartment sink, an SP technician finishes actively brushing the internal suction channel of a flexible bronchoscope and prepares to flush the lumen to completely physically remove all residual enzymatic detergent. Which specific liquid must the technician utilize to execute this critical flushing step safely? A. Water matching the exact purity quality specified within the device manufacturer's instructions for use. B. A fully activated bath of heated orthothialdehyde high-level disinfectant. C. A highly concentrated sodium chloride saline solution drawn from the operating room. D. Unfiltered municipal tap water directly from the decontamination sink faucet. Correct answer A. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. Rinsing is a critical physical step that completely removes detergent residues that could otherwise deactivate subsequent high-level disinfectants or harm the patient. The technician must strictly utilize the specific water quality, such as treated reverse osmosis or deionized water, explicitly validated and mandated by the endoscope manufacturer's instructions for use. Trap analysis. Option B. High-level disinfectants are applied only after the device has been completely washed and thoroughly rinsed of all detergents. This option would be correct if the technician had already finished the final water rinse and was physically preparing to soak the scope for microbial lethality. Option C. Saline contains salt which causes severe physical pitting and corrosion on surgical instruments. This option would be correct if the scenario described an incorrect, highly discouraged practice mistakenly performed by a surgical technician inside the operating room to keep soil moist. Option D. Unfiltered tap water contains hard minerals that can leave scaling inside delicate lumens. This option would be correct if the technician was performing the initial gross soil flush during the first physical stage of decontamination before using the detergent soak. Concept extension. If the instructions mandate critical water for the final rinse, using standard tap water instead can physically deposit pyrogens and heavy metals directly onto the flexible endoscope's delicate optical lenses. Question 83. At the clean assembly workstation, an SP technician is physically arranging 24 stainless steel hemostats and Kelly clamps onto a stringer inside a heavy abdominal instrument tray. To guarantee that the pressurized steam physically penetrates and sterilizes the bioburden-prone box locks during the autoclave cycle, the technician must execute which specific mechanical action on each clamp? A. Physically unlock the ratchets and spread the ring handles completely wide open. B. Tightly compress and lock the ratchets to the first click to prevent intracycle shifting. C. Wrap each individual hinged jaw tightly with absorbent medical-grade cotton gauze. D. Submerge the closed ratchets entirely in a thick waterproof silicone instrument lubricant. Correct answer A. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. The foundational requirement for steam sterilization is direct unobstructed physical contact between the sterilant gas and every microscopic surface of the surgical instrument. The technician must physically unlock the ratchets and fully open the jaws of all hinged instruments to expose the box locks, which are notorious for hiding microscopic blood and tissue. Trap analysis. Option B. Locking the ratchets physically shields the intricate box lock hinge from the steam, guaranteeing a sterilization failure. This option would be correct if the technician was passing a loaded needle holder directly into the surgeon's hand inside the active sterile field. Option C. Wrapping individual jaws creates a dense physical barrier that impedes steam penetration and prolongs drying time, causing wet packs. This option would be correct if the technician was packing fragile glassware that required physical cushioning against impact. Option D. Silicone lubricants are waterproof and physically block steam from touching the metal surface entirely. This option would be correct if describing a prohibited maintenance practice that actively prevents successful terminal sterilization. Concept extension. utilizing an appropriately sized U-shaped or T-shaped metal stringer is the optimal physical method to keep multiple hinged instruments securely open and highly organized within a dense surgical tray. Question 84. While physically sorting items returning from the cardiovascular suite, an SP technician carefully handles a highly complex multi-part surgical biopsy punch. Knowing this specific device physically punctures the patient's heart tissue and directly enters the bloodstream, the technician categorizes it under the Spaulding classification system to ensure it receives which required lethal processing cycle? A. It is a critical device requiring terminal steam sterilization. B. It is a semi-critical device requiring extended high-level chemical disinfection. C. It is a non-critical device requiring manual wiping with a low-level environmental disinfectant. D. It is a restricted device requiring thermal pasteurization at 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Correct answer A. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. The Spaulding classification system categorizes medical instruments based on the physical infection risk they pose to the patient. Devices that physically penetrate the skin, enter sterile anatomical tissue, or access the vascular system are categorized as critical items. Because they carry the absolute highest risk for transmitting deadly infections, the technician must physically route these items for complete terminal sterilization. Trap analysis. Option B. Semi-critical devices physically contact intact mucous membranes but do not routinely penetrate deep tissue. This option would be correct if the technician was processing a flexible gastrointestinal endoscope used to physically inspect a patient's stomach lining. Option C. Non-critical devices only physically touch intact skin, posing the lowest infection risk. This option would be correct if the technician was manually wiping down a sequential compression blood pressure cuff returning from the recovery ward. Option D. Thermal pasteurization utilizes heated water to kill pathogens but does not achieve true sterility. This option would be correct if the technician was operating a specialized mechanical washer to disinfect respiratory therapy breathing circuits. Concept extension. If a critical item cannot physically withstand the extreme heat or moisture of a steam autoclave, the technician must select a validated low-temperature sterilization alternative, such as vaporized hydrogen peroxide or ethylene oxide gas, rather than downgrading the item to mere high-level disinfection. Question 85. At the start of the 6 a.m. shift, before actively loading any surgical trays into the 270 degree Fahrenheit steam autoclave, the SP technician grabs a lint-free cloth and a mild cleaning solution to physically wipe down the heavy rubber seal lining the inner edge of the chamber door. According to overarching facility maintenance standards, what is the minimum required frequency for the technician to physically execute this specific gasket cleaning protocol? A. At least once every single day prior to operational use. B. Once a week during the scheduled Sunday deep cleaning shift. C. Once a month coinciding with the biological indicator quality audit. D. Immediately following the completion of every single 4-minute exposure cycle. Correct answer A. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. The rubber door gasket is the critical physical component that seals the autoclave chamber, allowing it to safely build up the extreme internal steam pressure required for sterilization. To prevent lint, dust, or dried debris from compromising this seal and causing a catastrophic cycle failure, national standards mandate that the technician must physically inspect and wipe the gasket clean at least daily. Trap analysis. Option B. Waiting a full week allows significant physical debris to harden on the rubber, leading directly to a blown seal mid-cycle. This option would be correct if the technician was tasked with pulling the heavy loading carriages completely out of the department to scrub the metal wheels with a wire brush. Option C. Monthly cleaning is severely negligent for an active piece of sterilization hardware. This option would be correct if the technician was physically checking the expiration dates on the facility's emergency backup supply of disposable chemical indicator strips. Option D. Wiping the intensely hot rubber gasket after every individual cycle poses a severe burn hazard to the technician and is operationally inefficient. This option would be correct if the technician was required to physically log the exact batch control number into the tracking computer after each load finishes. Concept extension. While wiping the gasket, the technician must also visually inspect the rubber for any physical cracks, shrinking, or brittleness. If structural damage is spotted, the machine must be immediately locked out of service until biomedical engineering replaces the part. Question 86. An SP technician is physically gathering instruments based on a printed pick list requesting a heavy retractor set for the complete surgical removal of a patient's stomach. Which specific medical term must the technician identify on the surgical schedule to confirm this exact anatomical excision procedure? A. Gastritis. B. Gastrectomy. C. Gastric bypass. D. Gastric sleeve. Correct answer B. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. Understanding medical terminology is crucial for sterile processing technicians to prepare the correct physical surgical sets. The root word gastro refers to the stomach, and the surgical suffix ectomy means the physical excision or complete removal of an organ. Therefore, a gastrectomy is the exact procedure for physically removing the stomach. Trap analysis. Option A. Gastritis indicates inflammation, not surgical removal. This option would be correct if the scenario asked for the medical term defining a patient suffering from an inflamed stomach lining being physically examined with a flexible endoscope. Option C. A gastric bypass is a bariatric alteration that reroutes the intestines to a small stomach pouch, but it does not completely remove the stomach. This option would be correct if the technician was preparing specialized staplers for a weight loss anatomical rerouting procedure. Option D. A gastric sleeve reduces the size of the stomach but leaves a tubular portion intact. This option would be correct if the pick list specified instruments for a restrictive bariatric volume reduction surgery. Concept extension. Knowing the exact procedure helps the technician anticipate the need for heavy abdominal retractors, such as a Bookwalter or Balfour, which require specialized physical inspection for missing wing nuts or damaged ratchets during assembly. Question 87. An SP technician is physically unboxing a newly arrived complex orthopedic power drill and reading the manufacturer's physical package insert to determine the mandated sterilization parameters. Which specific federal regulatory agency strictly enforces these printed physical parameters with the power of law, unlike voluntary professional associations? A. The Food and Drug Administration. B. The Association for the Advancement of Medical Instrumentation. C. The Association of Perioperative Registered Nurses. D. The Association for Professionals in Infection Control and Epidemiology. Correct answer A. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. The Food and Drug Administration is a federal government agency that creates strict legally enforceable mandates regarding the physical processing of medical devices. The technician must follow FDA-cleared instructions for use because it acts as a regulatory body, unlike professional membership associations that only offer voluntary best practice guidelines. Trap analysis. Option B. This organization produces voluntary processing standards. This option would be correct if the technician was referencing the widely utilized ST79 guidelines to physically load a steam sterilizer properly. Option C. This association provides voluntary perioperative guidelines for surgical nurses. This option would be correct if the technician was reviewing the organization that dictates the physical professional operating room attire standards sterile processing staff must don. Option D. This organization focuses on voluntary infection prevention epidemiology. This option would be correct if the technician was reading a published study detailing the physical statistical tracking of hospital-acquired infections. Concept extension. Understanding the distinct difference between voluntary guidelines and regulatory laws ensures technicians know which rules carry severe legal and financial penalties for the facility if physically violated during daily tasks. Question 88. an SP technician is physically pushing a heavy bariatric instrument cart through the hospital corridors and notices ceiling-mounted sensors automatically logging the cart's physical movement on the dispatch monitor. Which specific computerized tracking hardware is physically attached to this cart to enable this continuous hands-free signal transmission? A. Radio frequency identification tags. B. Laser-etched barcodes. C. Standard adhesive barcodes. D. Dot matrix printed applications. Correct answer A. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. Real-time tracking requires technology that constantly broadcasts its physical location. Radio frequency identification tags emit signals that are automatically picked up by sensors mounted in facility ceilings and doorways, providing the live physical location of the tray without requiring the technician to stop and physically scan the item. Trap analysis. Option B. Laser-etched barcodes only update the system when a technician actively points a scanner at them. This option would be correct if the technician was physically scanning the permanent mark on an individual stainless steel hemostat. Option C. Standard barcodes require manual scanning and only provide snapshot data at fixed physical stations. This option would be correct if the technician was utilizing a handheld scanner to log a tray at a designated clean assembly prep table. Option D. Dot matrix refers to a highly outdated low-resolution printing method, not a tracking signal. This option would be correct if the technician was historically operating archaic printing technology to generate paper sterilization load records. Concept extension. While radio frequency identification systems provide exceptional logistical visibility, they require a massive capital investment because every physical doorway must be hardwired with sensor antennae to track the moving tags. Question 89. An SP technician discovers a small contained fire in a trash bin near the decontamination sinks and immediately retrieves the wall-mounted fire extinguisher. To safely and effectively discharge this pressurized safety device, the technician must physically execute which precise sequence of mechanical actions? A. Pull the safety pin, aim at the base, squeeze the handle, and sweep from side to side. B. Push the safety pin, aim at the flames, squeeze the handle, and sweep from side to side. C. Push the activation button, aim at the base, squeeze the trigger, and swipe vertically. D. Pull the activation cord, aim at the smoke, squeeze the trigger, and swipe vertically. Correct answer A. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. In a high-stress fire emergency, healthcare workers are trained to rely on the Universal Pass acronym to ensure the mechanical extinguisher is discharged correctly. This stands directly for pulling the metal pin to unlock the lever, aiming the nozzle at the physical base of the fire to smother the fuel source, squeezing the handle to release the agent, and sweeping horizontally to cover the entire burning area. Trap analysis. Option B. Pushing the pin does not unlock the device, and aiming at the top flames misses the fuel source. This option would be correct if describing a common physical error panicked staff make that results in a failed fire suppression attempt. Option C. Extinguishers do not feature activation buttons, and swiping vertically is entirely ineffective against a spreading fire. This option would be correct if the technician was incorrectly attempting to physically operate a specialized overhead shower system instead of a portable extinguisher. Option D. There is no activation cord to pull, and aiming at the smoke wastes the chemical agent. This option would be correct if describing the physical deployment of a manual fire curtain rather than an active chemical extinguisher. Concept extension. Prior to utilizing the extinguisher, the technician must always ensure they have a clear unobstructed physical path to an exit door so they can safely evacuate if the sweeping action fails to smother the flames. Question 90. An SP technician is physically loading a multi-level mechanical washer disinfector manifold while simultaneously reading the printed standard operating procedure taped to the machine and listening to the supervisor's spoken commands over the intercom. This specific active scenario demonstrates that effective workplace transmission of instructions physically incorporates which combined elements? A. Utilizing a combination of spoken words, written documents, and nonverbal expressions. B. exclusively utilizing loud verbal spoken commands across the noisy washroom. C. Relying strictly on printed standard operating procedure documents without speaking. D. Utilizing only physical hand gestures to overcome the loud mechanical equipment noise. Correct answer A. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. True communication is a multi-channel process of successfully transmitting information so the receiver fully understands the physical task intent. To guarantee comprehension in a complex clinical environment, the process should simultaneously utilize verbal instructions like spoken words, visual guidelines like written text, and physical demonstrations like nonverbal body language. Trap analysis. Option B. Solely relying on verbal commands in a loud decontamination area guarantees the technician will physically misunderstand critical steps. This option would be correct if the scenario was demonstrating a highly ineffective and dangerous training method leading to physical processing errors. Option C. Handing someone a document without physical demonstration fails to verify their mechanical competency. This option would be correct if the technician was forced to figure out a complex physical machine entirely alone due to a lazy administrative training approach. Option D. Using only gestures leaves technical details like exact detergent dosing measurements completely ambiguous. This option would be correct if the technician was forced to communicate exclusively through a thick soundproof glass window physically separating the clean and dirty zones. Concept extension. To finalize this communication cycle safely, the technician must physically demonstrate loading the washer manifold while verbally explaining the steps back to the supervisor, providing the crucial feedback loop required to verify complete physical understanding. Question 91. An SP technician is physically typing their required continuing education credits into the department computer after completing a hands-on vendor workshop regarding the mechanical assembly of a new surgical robot. By actively participating in this specific learning event, the technician is physically engaging in which targeted professional development activity? A. Leading a cross-functional departmental team-building exercise. B. Delivering a formal public speaking presentation to facility leadership. C. Maintaining current knowledge of evolving industry regulations and guidelines. D. Securing an immediate administrative promotion to a supervisory shift role. Correct answer C. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. Professional development encompasses a wide range of activities designed to enhance a technician's value and career trajectory. Attending external seminars and reading updated regulatory guidelines ensures the technician's clinical knowledge remains current, which is a critical component of maintaining professional competency in a constantly evolving medical field. Trap analysis. Option A. Attending a lecture is an individual educational pursuit, not a group bonding activity. This option would be correct if the technician was physically organizing an off-site retreat to improve interpersonal communication between the decontamination and assembly shifts. Option B. Registering for a seminar places the technician in the role of a learner, not a presenter. This option would be correct if the technician was standing at a podium delivering a meticulously researched slide presentation regarding physical instrument damage rates. Option D. Attending one seminar builds skills but does not instantly trigger a job title change. This option would be correct if the scenario described the technician physically signing an official human resources contract accepting a newly offered management position. Concept extension. Certified technicians are strictly required to document a specific number of these continuing education units annually to legally maintain their credentialing status and prove they are actively keeping their knowledge base current. Question 92. An SP technician is physically walking through the decontamination corridors with an operating room scrub nurse, an infection preventionist, and a biomedical engineer to collaboratively map out a safer physical transport route for soiled case carts. What specific organizational term accurately describes this diverse problem-solving group? A. An exclusive interdepartmental sterile processing decision-making team. B. A centralized hospital executive management committee. C. A collaborative cross-functional operational team. D. a unified external vendor procurement task force. Correct answer C. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. When a complex operational issue spans multiple physical areas of the hospital, resolving it requires input from various disciplines. A group composed of frontline employees and specialists from distinctly different departments working together to solve a shared systemic problem is the exact definition of a cross-functional team. Trap analysis. Option A. This group includes nursing and engineering staff, making it interdepartmental, not interdepartmental. This option would be correct if the meeting consisted solely of the decontamination supervisor and 3 washroom technicians physically redesigning their own sink layout. Option B. The group consists of frontline clinical and technical workers, not high-level hospital executives. This option would be correct if the scenario described the hospital chief financial officer and chief medical officer meeting to finalize the annual facility budget. Option D. This team is fixing an internal physical routing issue, not purchasing items from outside companies. This option would be correct if the group was meeting with sales representatives to negotiate pricing contracts for new liquid chemical disinfectants. Concept extension. Participating in these diverse groups requires excellent human relations skills, as the sterile processing technician must effectively communicate the strict infection control limitations of the department to personnel who may not understand the physical sterilization workflow. Question 93. While physically measuring the decontamination floor to install high-traction anti-slip matting following a staff injury, the SP director receives a physical clipboard from the facility safety officer. During this interaction, which specific administrative function does the safety officer strictly delegate to the sterile processing director rather than handling it under the risk management umbrella? A. Facilitating the injured worker's immediate physical medical treatment. B. Processing the facility's financial liability and compensation claims. C. Administering routine employee disciplinary actions and daily scheduling. D. Filing the official occupational hazard accident report. Correct answer C. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. Risk management is a specialized facility program designed to identify, evaluate, and mitigate financial and legal risks related to patient and employee safety. Managing employee behavior, administering discipline, and handling staffing schedules are routine human resources and departmental leadership functions, falling completely outside the scope of the risk management department. Trap analysis. Option A. Injury management is a core component of risk management protocols following a physical workplace accident. This option would be correct if the scenario asked what immediate supportive action the safety officer must take to minimize the physical harm to the employee. Option B. Claims management handles the financial fallout of physical injuries and is central to mitigating hospital risk. This option would be correct if the scenario asked how the facility processes the medical bills generated by the employee emergency room visit. Option D. Accident reporting generates the data required for risk managers to identify unsafe physical trends. This option would be correct if the scenario asked what mandatory documentation the safety officer must submit to comply with federal workplace safety tracking laws. Concept extension. To prevent future slip and fall hazards, the risk management team mandates that the sterile processing director must constantly monitor the physical integrity of the installed floor mats surrounding all active 3-compartment sink stations. Question 94. An SP technician is physically manipulating the intricate control cables of a newly purchased surgical robotic arm at the assembly workstation, utilizing specialized knowledge recently gained from an intensive hands-on manufacturer workshop. By physically mastering these new advanced operational tasks, the technician is primarily executing which specific type of professional development? A. Maintaining baseline competency for their existing daily assignment. B. Engaging in targeted activities to aggressively advance their clinical skill set. C. Completing mandatory remedial training following a documented critical error. D. Fulfilling the basic human resources orientation requirements for a new hire. Correct answer B. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. Professional development involves continuous learning to improve one's career trajectory. By actively seeking out specialized training on highly complex newly introduced robotic equipment, the technician is moving beyond basic competency and deliberately advancing their clinical skill set, making them a more valuable and specialized asset to the healthcare facility. Trap analysis. Option A. The robotic system is newly purchased, meaning it represents advanced knowledge outside their current baseline physical routine. This option would be correct if the technician was simply reviewing the standard operating procedure manual for the basic stainless steel retractor trays they physically assemble every day. Option C. The scenario specifies the technician gained knowledge to advance skills, not as a physical punishment. This option would be correct if the technician was forced to attend a sterile packaging in service because they caused 3 consecutive wet packs through improper physical loading techniques. Option D. The technician is manipulating complex controls, meaning they have already completed initial physical orientation. This option would be correct if the scenario described an employee on their very first day learning how to physically log into the departmental time clock. Concept extension. Mastering advanced surgical robotics provides the technician with highly specialized knowledge that directly strengthens their resume when applying for specialized roles, such as the dedicated liaison between sterile processing and the neurosurgical operating room team. Question 95. An SP technician hastily receives a dropped cranial drill bit and rushes to physically process it utilizing an immediate-use steam sterilization cycle because the surgeon is waiting in the operating room. When completing the mandatory electronic load record for this specific rapid cycle, which unique combination of data points must the technician physically enter to comply with emergency processing standards? A. The passing results of the sterilizer daily internal vacuum leak test. B. The specific lot number of the process challenge device utilized for an implant load. C. The signature of the facility infection prevention director approving the cycle. D. The specific patient identifier and the exact clinical reason for bypassing terminal sterilization. Correct answer D. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. Immediate use steam sterilization is a high-risk procedure strictly reserved for urgent clinical emergencies, never for routine inventory shortages. To ensure strict accountability and traceability, regulatory agencies mandate that every single cycle record must explicitly include the specific patient identification and a documented justifiable clinical reason detailing exactly why true terminal sterilization could not be physically performed. Trap analysis. Option A. Leak testing is a daily morning machine diagnostic, not a requirement tied to individual rapid physical patient loads. This option would be correct if the technician was physically filling out the preliminary maintenance log before running the first Bowie-Dick test of the day. Option B. Process challenge devices are used to physically monitor implants, and standard drill bits are not implants left inside the human body. This option would be correct if the technician was physically processing a tray of permanent titanium bone screws utilizing a full terminal sterilization cycle. Option C. Infection control audits the records later. They do not physically stand by the machine to sign off on individual urgent loads. This option would be correct if the scenario asked whose physical signature is required on the annual departmental policy review manual. Concept extension. If the technician fails to document the specific clinical reason, hospital surveyors will cite the facility for improperly utilizing the rapid cycle for physical convenience rather than a genuine surgical emergency. Question 96. While actively assembling a delicate craniotomy set at the workstation, an SP technician notices a Joint Commission surveyor walking into the physical prep and pack area for an unannounced inspection. Who holds the ultimate physical responsibility for ensuring the department maintains continuous compliance with all operational standards at this exact moment? A. The designated facility safety officer. B. The departmental shift supervisor. C. Only the technicians assigned to the decontamination sink. D. Every single staff member physically operating within the department. Correct answer D. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. survey readiness is not a temporary physical state achieved just for an inspection, nor is it the sole administrative burden of management. It requires constant active adherence to strict infection control and processing protocols by every single person physically touching the instruments or navigating the workspace, meaning survey readiness is universally everyone's responsibility. Trap analysis. Option A. Safety officers manage broad policies, not the continuous physical adherence by every individual worker. This option would be correct if the scenario asked to identify who formally liaises with the local fire department to coordinate annual facility physical evacuation drills. Option B. Supervisors guide the shift but cannot physically execute every compliant action simultaneously for the entire team. This option would be correct if the scenario asked to identify who officially signs the final weekly staff payroll and physical attendance timesheets. Option C. Compliance is legally required across all physical zones, not merely the soiled side. This option would be correct if the scenario asked to identify exactly who must don heavy-duty fluid-resistant aprons and full face shields to perform physical manual scrubbing. Concept extension. Maintaining a physical state of continuous readiness ensures that whether a surveyor is present or not, the surgical trays leaving the department are perfectly safe for patient use, thereby completely eliminating the need for frantic last-minute behavioral corrections. Question 97. While physically wrapping a heavy orthopedic mallet utilizing 2 large sheets of disposable blue polypropylene flat wrap, the SP technician realizes the shelf supply is running extremely low. Under which specific logistical inventory category must the technician officially requisition these single-use packaging materials? A. Expendable consumable supplies. B. High-cost capital equipment. C. Durable patient care devices. D. Long-term depreciating assets. Correct answer A. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. In sterile processing inventory management, items that are physically used up, destroyed, or discarded after a single application are classified strictly as consumable items. Because disposable flat wrappers are permanently altered during sterilization and physically torn open in the operating room, they must be continuously monitored and reordered under this specific rapid turnover category. Trap analysis. Option B. Wrappers are cheap single-use fabrics, vastly different from expensive physical machinery. This option would be correct if the technician was submitting a formal financial requisition form to purchase a brand new ultrasonic cleaning console for the decontamination room. Option C. Wrappers are sterile barriers for instruments, not physical machines applied directly to a patient. This option would be correct if the technician was categorizing a mechanical sequential compression machine physically returned from the intensive care unit. Option D. Wrappers are utilized immediately and thrown away, not financially depreciated over several years. This option would be correct if the facility accountant was calculating the 10-year financial lifespan of a newly installed vaporized hydrogen peroxide sterilizer. Concept extension. Managing consumable supplies effectively requires setting strict par levels to physically ensure the department never halts production because a basic commodity, like chemical indicator tape or enzymatic detergent, is completely out of stock. Question 98. Before the morning rush begins, a biomedical engineering technician physically locks out the main automated washer disinfector to replace its internal chemical dosing tubes and recalibrate the thermal sensors according to a strict 90-day schedule. The SP technician knows this deliberate physical intervention is executed to achieve which primary operational goal? A. To rapidly repair a machine that has already caused a critical physical workflow delay. B. To proactively identify and mitigate potential mechanical failures before they actually occur. C. To retroactively document the root cause of a recent failed physical thermal disinfection cycle. D. To fulfill the daily end-of-shift cleaning protocol required by the department manager. Correct answer B. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. Preventive maintenance is a highly structured proactive equipment servicing strategy. By physically replacing components like worn tubing and recalibrating sensors before they break, the engineering team actively prevents sudden catastrophic mechanical failures, ensuring the sterile processing workflow continues uninterrupted. Trap analysis. Option A. This describes a reactive emergency repair, which occurs when a physical machine breaks unexpectedly. This option would be correct if the engineer was frantically dispatched because the sterilizer door gasket suddenly blew out mid-cycle, venting live steam into the room. Option C. Retroactive documentation investigates past physical errors, whereas maintenance focuses on the future. This option would be correct if the engineering team was investigating why an entire cart of orthopedic instruments physically emerged from the washer completely covered in dried bone debris. Option D. Daily cleaning protocols are basic physical chores performed by sterile processing staff, not engineers. This option would be correct if describing the physical action of a technician brushing the lint out of the steam sterilizer drain screen before clocking out. Concept extension. If an automated washer bypasses its scheduled preventive maintenance date, the facility risks operating a machine that may be improperly dosing chemicals or failing to reach the sustained 140 Fahrenheit temperatures required for true physical thermal disinfection. Question 99. An SP technician is physically refilling the chemical reservoir of a multi-chamber automated washer disinfector prior to running a load of heavily soiled suction tips. To prevent the high-pressure water spray arms from becoming physically buffered and rendered ineffective, the technician must verify the selected enzymatic detergent possesses which specific fluid characteristic? A. A highly concentrated acidic pH level. B. An extremely aggressive high alkaline profile. C. A rigorously formulated low foaming composition. D. A temperature-activated high sudsing action. Correct answer C. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. Mechanical cleaners rely on intense water pressure blasting from spinning spray arms to physically dislodge soil from instruments. If a detergent creates bubbles, that thick foam acts as a physical shock absorber, severely cushioning the impact of the water jets and utterly destroying the mechanical cleaning action. Therefore, all automated washer chemicals must strictly feature a low foaming composition. Trap analysis. Option A. Acidic cleaners cause severe physical metal pitting and are strictly reserved for targeted rust removal, not routine washing. This option would be correct if the technician was selecting a specific descaling agent to manually remove severe hard water stains from a stainless steel soaking basin. Option B. While some washers utilize alkaline detergents, an aggressive high alkaline profile is not the primary trait that prevents physical spray arm buffering, low foaming is. This option would be correct if the technician was formulating a specialized chemical wash designed solely to physically break down massive amounts of fat inside a heavy-duty cart washer. Option D. High sudsing generates dense foam, which causes catastrophic pressure drops in mechanical pumps. This option would be correct if a homeowner was utilizing a commercial dish soap to physically hand-wash domestic kitchenware in a deep residential sink. Concept extension. If a technician mistakenly pours a high-foaming manual sink detergent into the automated washer, the entire mechanical chamber will physically fill with suds, stalling the impellers and requiring a complete system drain and manual flush before operations can resume. Question 100. While physically retrieving a crushed glass vial from a positive biological indicator utilizing heavy forceps, an SP technician references the laboratory report detailing the exact microscopic shape of the surviving microorganisms. Which of the following morphological descriptions would the technician never see listed as a standard scientific classification for bacterial shape? A. A spherical cluster configuration. B. A perfectly cylindrical tubular form. C. An elongated rod-shaped structure. D. A twisted spiral-shaped body. Correct answer B. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. In microbiology, bacteria are strictly categorized by three primary physical shapes. The valid scientific shapes are spherical cocci, rod-shaped bacilli, and spiral-shaped spirilla or spirochetes. The term cylindrical is not a recognized medical or microbiological classification for physical bacterial morphology. Trap analysis. Option A, spherical bacteria, known as cocci, are a primary legitimate classification. This option would be correct if the technician was identifying the specific microscopic physical shape of Staphylococcus aureus, a major cause of surgical site infections. Option C, rod-shaped bacteria, known as bacilli, are a primary legitimate classification. This option would be correct if the technician was identifying the specific microscopic physical shape of the highly resistant Geobacillus stearothermophilus spores used in STEAM biological indicators. Option D, spiral-shaped bacteria, known as spirochetes, are a primary legitimate classification. This option would be correct if the technician was identifying the specific microscopic physical shape of the dangerous bacteria that physically causes syphilis. Concept extension. Identifying the specific physical shape of a bacterium helps infection preventionists determine the exact species causing a surgical outbreak, allowing them to mandate specific targeted liquid chemical disinfectants in the sterile processing decontamination area. Question 101. An SP technician is physically transitioning from taking their lunch break back into the clean assembly area to begin inspecting surgical instruments. Before touching any medical devices, the facility infection prevention policy dictates they must immediately execute which specific physical action, universally recognized as the absolute most critical defense against halting the chain of infection? A. Donning a fresh pair of heavy-duty sterile surgical gloves. B. Performing thorough hand hygiene using soap and water or an alcohol-based rub. C. Executing a complete terminal sterilization cycle on their workstation. D. Implementing strict surgical asepsis protocols by wearing a fluid-resistant gown. Correct answer B. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the World Health Organization both definitively state that the simple physical act of hand hygiene is the single most important and effective factor in reducing healthcare-associated infections. Washing hands physically breaks the mode of transmission, ensuring the technician does not transfer microbes from the break room to the clean instruments. Trap analysis. Option A, gloves do not replace hand hygiene, and sterile gloves are not utilized for routine prep and pack duties. This option would be correct if the scenario asked what a surgeon must physically don after completing their formal surgical scrub before operating. Option C, workstations undergo environmental disinfection, not terminal sterilization, which is reserved for the instruments themselves. This option would be correct if the technician was physically loading a biological indicator into an autoclave to process a critical surgical tray. Option D, gowns protect the worker clothing but do not sanitize their bare hands, which are the primary vectors of cross-contamination. This option would be correct if asking what specific personal protective equipment a technician must wear while physically scrubbing instruments at the decontamination sink. Concept extension. Even if a technician wears gloves during their shift, they must still execute physical hand hygiene immediately after removing the gloves, as microscopic tears in the latex or nitrile can allow pathogens to contaminate their skin. Question 102. An operating room nurse calls the sterile processing department in a panic, demanding the technician physically run a dropped titanium bone plate through an immediate-use steam sterilization cycle to finish an ongoing spinal case. The technician knows that according to strict federal guidelines, they are only legally permitted to rapidly process this specific internal device under what exact physical circumstance? A. Only if the metallic instrument has been actively utilized in surgeries for less than 8 years. B. Only when the medical facility has completely exhausted its entire central supply inventory of plastic instruments. C. Only if the specific orthopedic tool is being utilized for a routine non-invasive outpatient diagnostic procedure. D. Only if the surgical team provides documented proof of a life or death emergency where no alternative sterile implant exists. Correct answer D. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. A titanium bone plate is a surgical implant designed to remain inside the human body. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, alongside major professional organizations, rigidly stipulate that implants must never undergo immediate-use steam sterilization because the rapid cycle lacks the thorough biological monitoring required for extreme-risk items. The sole physical exception is a heavily documented extreme clinical emergency where waiting for a terminally sterilized replacement would cause severe patient harm. Trap analysis. Option A. The physical age of the instrument does not legally dictate its sterilization method. This option would be correct if asking about a facility internal administrative policy regarding when to physically retire and recycle older surgical inventory. Option B. Exhausting plastic instruments is irrelevant to processing a permanent metal implant. This option would be correct if asking why a purchasing manager had to submit an urgent overnight supply order for single-use consumable retractors. Option C. Implants are by definition highly invasive and not used for non-invasive outpatient diagnostics. This option would be correct if asking what type of procedure carries the lowest fundamental risk of surgical site infection according to the Spaulding classification. Concept extension. If this documented emergency rapid cycle is performed, the technician must physically include a biological indicator and a Class 5 integrating indicator in the load, but the implant may be released to the operating room before the biological indicator finishes incubating due to the urgent necessity. Question 103. While physically assembling a heavy reconstruction tray at the prep and pack workstation, the SP technician inspects a heavy chisel-like surgical instrument to ensure its beveled distal edge is perfectly sharp and free of microscopic pitting. By interpreting the medical terminology of its name, osteotome, the technician knows the surgeon will use this specific tool to physically execute which mechanical action? A. To actively cut, shave, or mechanically sculpt bone tissue. B. To physically retract and hold open heavy abdominal muscle layers. C. To aggressively clamp severed blood vessels to achieve immediate hemostasis. D. To visually inspect the internal lining of a patient's lower gastrointestinal tract. Correct answer A. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. Medical terminology defines an instrument physical purpose. The root word osteo translates to bone, and the suffix tome identifies a cutting instrument. Therefore, an osteotome is a robust mechanical device engineered specifically for a surgeon to cut, slice, or physically shape human bone during orthopedic procedures. Trap analysis. Option B. Tools used to hold tissue open are classified as retractors. This option would be correct if the technician was visually inspecting the ratcheted arms of a heavy-duty Balfour or Bookwalter instrument. Option C. Tools used to clamp vessels are classified as hemostatic forceps. This option would be correct if the technician was physically checking the box lock and serrations of a Kelly or Cryle clamp. Option D. Tools used to look inside the body are endoscopes. This option would be correct if the technician was physically leak testing the long flexible insertion tube of a colonoscope. Concept extension. Because the osteotome relies on a razor-sharp physical edge to function safely, the sterile processing technician must apply a specialized protective silicone tip guard over the distal end prior to packaging to prevent the heavy blade from tearing the sterile wrapper during transport. Question 104. An SP technician is physically loading a low-temperature vaporized hydrogen peroxide gas plasma sterilizer and must carefully review the materials of the items placed on the internal carriage. To ensure the chemical sterilant does not abort the cycle, the technician verifies that all the items loaded belong to which highly compatible material category? A. Sterile liquid solutions enclosed in glass vials. B. Solid metallic instruments such as stainless steel and aluminum. C. Finely milled pharmacological powders and chemical compounds. D. Highly absorbent woven cellulose textiles like cotton towels. Correct answer B. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. Vaporized hydrogen peroxide is a highly sensitive low-temperature sterilant. It is exceptionally compatible with hard non-porous surfaces like plastics and solid metals like stainless steel, titanium, and aluminum, which allows it to successfully sterilize delicate items like rigid scopes and camera batteries without causing thermal damage. Trap analysis. Option A. Liquids cannot be processed in deep vacuum low-temperature systems because the intense negative pressure will cause the fluids to physically boil, explode, and abort the cycle. This option would be correct if asking what items are processed in a gravity displacement steam sterilizer utilizing a specialized liquid cycle. Option C. Powders physically block the sterilant gas from penetrating and can get sucked into the vacuum lines. This option would be correct if the technician was operating a dry heat oven sterilizer specifically designed for anhydrous materials. Option D. Cellulose-based materials like cotton or paper aggressively absorb the hydrogen peroxide gas, starving the chamber of sterilant and causing the machine sensors to trigger an immediate cycle failure. This option would be correct if asking what material constitutes traditional woven surgical wrappers utilized strictly in steam autoclaves. Concept extension. If a single paper chemical indicator strip intended for steam sterilization is accidentally left inside a tray loaded into a gas plasma machine, that tiny piece of paper contains enough cellulose to physically absorb the gas and abort the entire cycle. Question 105. While manually stacking terminally sterilized cardiovascular trays onto the highest wire shelves in the sterile storage room, the SP technician must utilize a tape measure to ensure a strict vertical gap remains between the top of the packages and the ceiling fire suppression sprinkler heads. According to rigorous fire safety codes, what is the absolute minimum distance the technician must physically maintain? A. A clearance of precisely 8 inches. B. A clearance of at least 18 inches. C. A clearance of exactly 12 inches. D. A clearance of no less than 15 inches. Correct answer B. Knowledge point explanation. Core rationale. Facility fire safety is heavily regulated by organizations like the National Fire Protection Association and the Joint Commission. To guarantee that a ceiling sprinkler head can physically discharge water and create its fully engineered unhindered spray pattern to suppress flames during an emergency, no storage items may be stacked within 18 inches of the sprinkler deflector. Trap analysis. Option A. 8 to 10 inches is the strict vertical clearance required at the bottom of the shelving unit. This option would be correct if the scenario asked how high the lowest shelf must be raised above the physical floor to prevent contamination from mop splashes and rolling carts. Option C. 12 inches is an arbitrary number not tied to strict storage clearance protocols. This option would be correct if asking a generic measurement question about the total length of a standard physical ruler. Option D. 15 inches is an incorrect measurement that violates the standardized fire code. This option would be correct if the facility was actively operating under obsolete internal guidelines that would result in an immediate citation during a physical audit. Concept extension. This 18-inch physical clearance rule applies universally across the entire healthcare facility, regardless of whether the specific room contains sterile surgical instruments, general consumable supplies, or basic administrative office paperwork.